I love history, and I love sharing history. One of the little problems with genealogy is that when I was in Mexico City doing research in the archives, in the Archivo General de la Nación in Mexico City, I came across a court record, 1792. And this court record was for Jose Maria Castillo. And I thought, that looks pretty familiar. And so I checked, and sure enough, it was my great-great-great-great-grandfather. And I looked at the court record. He had gone AWOL from his unit in Monterrey because he was drunk. And so for his punishment, they sent him to Goliad. They figured he was going to die in Texas anyway, so what the heck. So from Monterrey, they sent him to Goliad, and he actually survived, married the daughter of one of the other soldiers, and eventually they got a land grant from the Power and Hewetson family. So we go back in Texas way back, but embarrassingly way back. So that's the only problem with genealogy, when you find out things that sometimes are not quite so honorable. But that's the way our great-great-great-grandparents did. Now, what I wanted to do today was to introduce you to a young man named Fernando de León. This is a young man that survived through all of this period, and one of the things that happened to him, as we will see, is that he wound up being problems for both sides. So this is why I want you to see what happened to the people, not only before San Jacinto, but after San Jacinto. So let's look at what some of these people were going through. Okay. There it is. Okay. So we start with who were the De León family. I just came from Victoria. I was in Victoria last week. They had their 200th anniversary. Victoria was founded 200 years ago, and when they were founded, one of the things that they did was to bring people from Mexico. Unlike Stephen Austin, who started at the same time, this is one of the things that when we look at the family of Martin and Patricia, Martin was a muleteer. This is sort of like being a truck driver. So you probably don't want your daughter marrying a truck driver, and especially not if you are the parents of Patricia de la Garza, who was very wealthy. And in this case, how do we know that she was wealthy? When we look at her background, her dowry, which she was given when she married, was 9,000 pesos. There was no place else. When I started looking at the archives in Monterrey, in Saltillo, in Mexico City, most of the dowries were 3,000. A few, there was just a handful that were 5,000. But to get 9,000 pesos at a time when a peso and the dollar were the same, this was an incredible, incredible wealth. And so when we talk about the settlements of Texas, when we look at people like this family, the De León family, they come from two entirely different social stratas. So you can imagine having a very beautiful, young, wealthy daughter, and she is going to marry, oh my gosh, a muleteer. Now, why are the muleteers considered maybe second class, perhaps? When we look at the muleteers, we have to remember that almost all traffic in northern Mexico was carried by mules. And as a matter of fact, we were just in Groesbeck, and there was a gentleman that was using mules to take a little wagon around Old Fort Parker, and he said that the mules have to be the same height. The reason that they are the same height is because when the mules step, if they are the same height, their step is the same distance. And so in this case, mules that are stepping the same length of stride are not going to bump up one against the other. And so it makes for a much better mule train. And so this was one of the reasons that when we talk about Mexican independence, Martín de León is going to be involved in Mexican independence. And this, of course, is Father Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla. When we look at Father Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla, why? Why does Mexico go up in revolt? What is it that happens? This is one of the things that we tend to forget, is that Mexican independence did not occur in 1810. Mexico did not become a country until 1821. And so when we're looking at this revolt, I want you all to picture yourselves in San Antonio. Y'all are going to have to be my characters here. So think of yourselves in San Antonio. On this side over here, we're going to have our liberals, my federalists. On this side over here, we're going to have our conservatives, our royalists. And so for those of you that are royalists, why did the liberals go up in revolt? What is happening? What has happened? Some of you may know Napoleon. And when we talk about Napoleon, remember that Napoleon in 1808 had put his brother on the Spanish throne. Joseph Bonaparte is now suddenly on the Spanish throne. So what the heck? Those of you that are my good liberals, you all are going to suddenly say, wait a minute, how can we possibly have a foreigner, a Frenchman, on the Spanish throne? You all are the ones that went up in revolt. You all started fighting. You said, no, we can't have this. But my conservatives, my centralists over here, you all were the ones that said, no, this is the royal government. Whatever it is, we accept it. And so you have a conflict going on in San Antonio. And so yes, when we look at San Antonio, what we're going to find is that my liberals, you all are actually going to come over here and you're going to start chopping up on the conservatives. You're going to capture the conservatives. You're going to slit their throats. You're going to pull their tongues out and cut them off. This is not a very nice thing, but you're fighting for your liberty, right? Liberty. This is your liberty. My conservatives, what are you all going to do? You all are immediately going to start getting on the phone. No, I have to be careful. You didn't get on the phone. They didn't have cell phones back then. But I have to be careful with my students. Not all of them, obviously. Not all of them. But in this case, you all contacted Mexico City and you said, oh my God, these liberals are causing us all this problem. So you all are the ones that said, send us help. Send us somebody. And they sent General Joaquin de Arredondo, the great General Joaquin de Arredondo. And he comes into San Antonio, and sure enough, there is an army that has come down from San Antonio, and General Arredondo catches them at the Battle of Medina. We still don't know exactly where the Battle of Medina was, but in this case, he massacres all the liberals. So these liberals now, who thought that they had it made, now suddenly have a royalist general. And ladies, they took you all and locked you into a warehouse. And they made you grind corn for General Arredondo's soldiers, for his tortillas. And then you all heard the bullets. You heard the bullets as General Arredondo, with his young lieutenant, Santa Anna. His young lieutenant, Lopez de Santa Anna, is actually his lieutenant. And he is there with Arredondo when they began shooting the brothers, the fathers, the sons, your uncles. And what did you all do? Most of you went back to your ranches. You said, not me. There's nothing I can do. And so in this case, now we have the royalists back in power. Now think about the Martín de León family. When we're looking at the Martín de León family, that Battle of Medina, whoops, I went in the wrong direction. Nope. Okay, so in this case, what is a mother to do when she hears that all her family is being shot by General Arredondo? She says, let's get out of here. And so it is Patricia de la Garza de León who says, let us go back to my home in Soto la Marina and get out of this way. And so in this case, by 1814, they have gone back to Soto la Marina and then come back to Texas. But where do they move to? They need to have protection. They need to have support. And in this case, they're going to move as close as they can to Goliad, La Bahía del Espíritu Santo. Why? Because that's the presidio. That's the fort. That's where all the soldiers are. And they can protect you. So in this case, they settle on the Aransas River Ranch. Now remember, Martín de León was a muleteer. So what's he going to do on the Aransas Ranch? He's going to sell mules. He's going to sell mules. He's going to breed mules and sell mules. And so they're doing just fine. Thank you very much. And so this is when we begin to have the children. Fernando is the eldest son. So you're going to have to be my Fernando. Okay, my Fernando right over here, our hero. So in this case, Fernando, as the eldest son, now for those of you that know Mexican families, you know, it's always, ay, mi querido, mi amor, mi rey. The eldest son is always the prize of the family. He's the most important person in the family. And so in this case, Fernando, I see a lot of you nodding your heads. Yeah. And in this case, Fernando is going to be the light of his family's eye. He is going to be the most important part of the family. And so when they moved to the Aransas River Ranch, as a matter of fact, some of you, if you've been to San Patricia, as they say, but in this case, they're going to settle in a place where there is a lot of trade coming and going. But look at the date, 1814. What is happening in 1814? That's the thing. When you think about history, think about all the things that are going on around it. It's not just one date. What is happening in 1814? Some of you may have heard the song, and I don't sing, so I'm not going to try to sing. In 1814, we took a little trip, along with Colonel Jackson, down the mighty Mississippi. We took a little bacon and we took a little beans, and we fought the bloody British in the town of New Orleans. So yes, that's what's going on in 1814. It's the War of 1812 that is ending in 1814. And you all remember Andrew Jackson. In 1815, he actually defeats the British Army. Andy Jackson at the Battle of New Orleans defeats the British. And the United States ends the War of 1812 with a victory. There was a few little problems. Some of you may remember Dolly Madison. What did she do? She had to take the picture of Washington out of the portrait frame, wrap it up under her arm, and book it out the back door while the British were coming in the front door, sitting down at her dining room table and eating her still hot meal, and then they burned her house down. The British burned the White House. Dolly Madison escaped. That was the War of 1812. Some of you may remember there was some guy out there on a boat in Baltimore Harbor, and the next morning he looks out, and what does he see? The flag is still waving. Oh, say, can you see? That's the War of 1812. That is why the War of 1812 is important. So in this case, 1814, how is that going to impact Texas? Now the British have been defeated. The British are gone. And so in this case, people are going to begin to come because the Americans have taken over New Orleans, which had been Spanish. So guess what? All our Spanish are suddenly saying, hey, thank you, appreciate the United States, but going back to Mexico. What do you think, Trinidad de Salcedo, the town of Trinity? Do we have anybody from Trinity? I have a lot of people up in Huntsville that are from Trinity. But in this case, Trinidad de Salcedo. That's where you get Trinidad de Salcedo, from people from New Orleans, Mexican, Spanish families from New Orleans coming into Texas and settling. So in this case, how is that going to affect all of these Spaniards that are coming? In this case, wait a minute, 1821. I thought Mexico got its independence in 1810. No, sorry. Father Hidalgo did not succeed in getting independence because we had the conflict between the conservatives and the liberals. And so in this case, when we look at this period, what begins to happen? They said, let's bring Anglos in. It is Agustín de Iturbide who says, let's bring the Anglos in. Why? What the heck? What was wrong with the Mexicans? Why were they doing something stupid like that? Or was it? They needed Anglos to come in and settle the frontier to keep the Comanches out. Remember, the Comanches by this time, if any of you all get a chance, read the book called Empire of a Summer Moon. Wow. Empire of a Summer Moon tells you about the Comanches. The Comanches, without question, were some of the best cavalry in the world. They had taken Spanish horses and they were raiding every single Spanish ranch they could to get Spanish horses. Because with those horses, they can become this wonderful cavalry, and they do. And so, yes, poor little Fernando over here with his ranch and his mules is suddenly finding that there are people coming in, and your father, Martín de León, says, wait a minute, if all of them are getting impresario grants, why can't I? So Fernando's father, Martín de León, asks for the settlement of his own impresario settlement. And he asks for Victoria. And Victoria is right down here just below DeWitt. And so why would Anglos come? Why on earth would Anglos? Stephen Austin was going up and down the Mississippi River, begging Anglos to come and settle in Texas. Wait a minute, didn't I hear about Comanches or something? We have to fight the Comanches. We have to raise our little hands and say, hey, I'm a good Mexican citizen, and I'm going to be a good Catholic, and I'm going to learn Spanish, and I'm going to defend Texas against the Comanches? Why are you coming? Because he is offering you at a time when land in the United States was selling for $1.25 an acre, but you couldn't buy just 1 acre. You had to buy 640 acres. Nobody had that kind of money except the land speculators. And the land speculators are the ones that will be happy to sell you 10 acres for $100. Wait a minute, I thought I was supposed to get it for $1.25 an acre. No, sorry. I'll send you, happy to sell you 10 acres for $100. That's $10. No. And so in this case, when suddenly Stephen Austin is coming and saying, hey, come to Texas and I will give you 4,428 acres. Dearly beloved, sorry, I teach too much Sunday school. You are going to come to Texas and you are going to get 7 square miles of land. For the cost of the paperwork, 12.5 cents. 12.5 cents. And you get 10 years to pay it off. Are you suddenly willing to raise your hand? Hey, I'm a good Mexican. I'm a great Mexican, and I'm going to learn Spanish, and by George, I'm going to speak Spanish in church. Would you? For that kind of land? For 12.5 cents an acre? Of course you would. Fernando over here, happy to have it. And so in this case, look at all of the grants, all of these empresarios. Now, what the heck was an impresario? Stephen Austin. Here's my Stephen Austin over here. Stephen Austin, the great Stephen Austin, is going to be a man who is going to literally, when we say he was the father of Texas, he was. What he put up with, oh my gosh, every time he gave somebody a grant. Oh, but he got a better grant than I did. His land is closer to the river, and why can't I? And my wife is picking on me, and, I want a divorce. No, sorry, you can't get a divorce. Stephen Austin was there on the ground to watch and take care of his people. And he took his people out there. He was the scribe. He was the notary. He was the military commander. He was the judge that did everything. Stephen Austin literally was the father for his colonists. The old 300, the first 300 that he brought. Now, the nice thing about it is that when he brings every 100 people, he gets 5 leagues and 5 labors. 5 leagues. 5 times 4,428. We're talking 20,000 acres. 20,000 acres for every 100 people. And he brought 300 in the first time. Have you got lots of land?
Yeah.
Woo!
4 acres to be exact.
We're talking a heck of a lot of land. So in this case, Stephen Austin, it's only one little problem. Can he sell his land? No, because you're giving it away. You have to give the land to your people. You're the father. You have to give the land to your people. So when we look at these impresario settlements, the only ones that succeeded were Austin. Stephen F. Austin succeeded around San Felipe, Harrisburg, Fort Bend, all of that area. Oh, by the way, have you ever noticed that all of those towns are not on the coast? Why weren't they on the coast? Because the Spanish government didn't trust you not to run contraband from New Orleans. So no, they're not going to let you. 10 leagues in, all of those towns, Gonzales, Bayer, all of those towns are 10 leagues from the coast so that you can't run illegal contraband. You know what the illegal contraband was? Tobacco! Because the Mexican government sold tobacco and taxed it. Funny thing, some things don't change. So in this case, when we talk about De Leon's grant, he is going to get the area of Victoria. This is an area that, as I say, 200 years, they just celebrated their 200th anniversary. So this is an area that he settles. It's called Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe Victoria. Some people say that it was named after the new president, the new triumvirate. Chances are good that it was not. I don't think he knew Guadalupe Victoria, who was the new triumvirate governor. But in this case, so when we look at his colony, chances are good that his colony was not named for the president. But Nuestra Señora, Our Lady of Guadalupe Victoria. Now, the only problem is, as happens, by liberals, conservatives, you lost your ability to govern. Why? Because you kicked the Spaniards out. And when you kicked the Spaniards out, they took their money that they had invested in the mines and they went back to Spain, and suddenly you were left with a bunch of mines that were flooding, and you didn't have anybody to go in there and help you pump the mines dry and get the silver out again. So yes, problems. Who takes over? My Federalists, my liberals. So you all are the ones that take over now. And so in this case, when we look at the difference between the conservatives and the Federalists, is there much difference? It's sort of like we have today. First the Democrats, then the Republicans, then the Democrats, then the Republicans. So in this case, the same thing. But in this case, Guadalupe Victoria is going to establish Coahuila y Texas. And when we talk about Coahuila y Texas, again, we have to go back to little Fernando over here. And Fernando is now going to be made Austin's colony is established. Except, are there problems over slavery? You bet. You bet. Why? Because the Mexican government in 1829 will not allow slavery. So what does Stephen Austin say? Oh, they're not slaves. They're not slaves. They're indentured servants. What are you going to do with 7 square miles, dearly beloved? You've got 7 square miles. Are you going to have slavery? Yep. You may call them indentured servants, but slavery, yes, there was. Contraband? Why contraband? Why so much problem with contraband? Because your wife, sitting right there, actually Stephen Austin never married, sorry. He didn't marry. But in this case, the beautiful wife needs a mantilla for Sunday church. Except that if you get the mantilla from Mexico City, it is going to be taxed all the way up the mount, all the way up through all the states. Every state is going to be able to tax it. That's the thing about federalism. So in this case, it gets up to you and it's $400. But if you go to New Orleans, French New Orleans, right across the border, you can get it for $20. Would you? Heck yeah, if the wife wants her nice little mantilla, by George, let's get it for her from New Orleans. So problems, you bet. Contraband, yes, especially when you have contraband. Customs, how are you going to control all of that contraband? The tobacco that people are trying to sneak in. That's the nice thing about tobacco. It's addictive. It still is. And do people still use it? Ask my husband. I can't break him of it. He still smokes his pipe. But in this case, customs. What are you going to do? You are going to set up a bunch of places all the way around the colonies. Martin de Leon's colony at Victoria is going to have protection. Green DeWitt's colony, the only problem with Green DeWitt was, sorry, he became a drunk. So he never succeeded in bringing all of his people in. Hayden Edwards up north. Some of you, how many of you all have been to Nacogdoches? All right, if you've been to Nacogdoches, you've probably seen the Fredonia Hotel. What the heck is the Fredonia Hotel all about? Hayden Edwards started handing out land that had been given to Mexican settlers. And what did they do? They complained. Now, ask yourself, if you are one of these people, would you go and fight against Hayden Edwards? Or are you going to keep your mouth shut and say, no, don't take my land away from me. I like my land. Don't take my land. Chances are good you're not going to go help Hayden Edwards. Hayden Edwards got booted out. The Fredonia Rebellion did not succeed. But in this case, Green DeWitt, also not successful. Martin de Leon was the only one who was successful. Now, that Hayden Edwards rebellion, look where he is, up there in Fredonia. So in this case, that's one of the problems. Now, because of that revolt, because of that rebellion, suddenly you've got, I'm going to make you into my Mieri Teran, right over here. Mieri Teran is going to be sent by the Mexican government to inspect Texas. And what does he find? How many of you all have actually learned Spanish? A few of you, very good. See, Mieri Teran did. But in this case, how many of you are good Catholics? The only Catholic priest around is a drunken Irishman named Muldoon, Michael Muldoon, unhappily. You know, he gets around to marry you or baptize your kids or stick you in the ground and do the nomen nomen over you when you die, when he's not drunk. So this is a problem. But Mieri Teran comes to Texas and he says, oh my God, these Anglos that we thought were going to be so loyal are busy growing cotton, making a profit, bringing in tobacco illegally. And so what are we going to do? We've got to do something to stop all of these difficulties. And so in this case, what do? you close the borders. The law of April 6th, 1830. The law of April 6th, 1830 actually closed the borders. Did they build a wall? No, they didn't build a wall. But they did close the borders. And in this case, who are you going to bring in to settle Texas? Who can you bring in? Who are the best Irish Catholics? People from Ireland. So yes, what are you going to do? You're going to bring in, at San Patricio, you're going to bring in McMullen and McGloin. Actually, they were two Irish impresarios from Mexico City. You're going to bring in Power and Hewetson to Refugio. And in this case, these are Irish. But are they loyal to the conservatives? You bet they are. You bet they are, because suddenly they have land. But who taught them? Remember who these people are. These people are Irish potato farmers who've been digging in the dirt all their lives, and now suddenly here they are looking at a longhorn and wondering, what the heck am I supposed to do with this thing? Carlos de la Garza on the San Antonio River helped his Irish neighbors. He taught them how to get on a horse. There's a wonderful description by Noah Smithwick in his book on Texas. Noah Smithwick says that he was walking. Most everybody walked. The only ones who had horses were the wealthy. But in this case, Stephen Austin, but in this case, he comes to the De León family ranch and he sees these cowboys unbucking broncos and up and down and being thrown off. And Martin de León says, "Wouldn't you like a horse?" And he says, "Thank you, I'll walk." Not taking one of those horses. And so this is one of the difficulties when the Irish come into Texas. They have to learn to ride. They have to learn to round up cattle. They didn't know how, and Carlos de la Garza helps them. When they came, they were dying of cholera. They were sick. They had yellow fever. They had all sorts of problems. And so, yes, it is Carlos de la Garza that helps them, helps his Irish neighbors. It pays to help your neighbors, as we're going to see. But in this case, contraband, this is the tobacco that was going out of Texas. Slaves, yes. Yes, they were. But in this case, now with President Bustamante in 1830, he is the one who closes the borders. And when he closed the borders, suddenly you can't trade anymore. Is this going to stop you all from running contraband? Hardly. And so when we talk about how are you going to control those colonies, you put in customs houses. Now these towns, dearly beloved, still exist today. But we see these words, Lipantitlan, and don't even ask me to pronounce it in English. I don't know what it is in English. Does anybody know? But it's an English town. It's an American town. Lipantitlan or I don't know how they pronounce it. But Lipantitlan, Tenochtitlan. Anybody know the name, how they pronounce that?
Tenochtitlan, you got it right.
No, but how do Anglos pronounce it?
I think it's the same actually.
Do they?
I hear people like Tenochtitlan. Like they pronounce the T like Talan, but
Yeah.
similar.
But I think they pronounce it like Tanakatlan or something. But anyway, Turan, Anahuac, it's not Anahuac, it's Anahuac, Velasco. All of these towns, what are those towns there for? Those are forts, and they are forts to collect taxes. Remember, when Stephen Austin started his colony, they allowed you 10 years not to pay taxes. Sorry, your 10 years are up. And now you're going to have to start paying taxes. To who? To all those customs, those presidios, those forts. And so we run into trouble when we talk about Juan Davis Bradburn. We're going to have trouble at Turan. We're going to have trouble at Anahuac. We're going to have trouble at Velasco. And we don't have time to go into all the details. But yes, Juan Davis Bradburn was actually a Mexican Colonel. Juan Davis, John Davis. He was actually a Mexican colonel, but he's American. And he's the one that charges the taxes. So do people hate him? Oh, yes. And so in this case, the Anahuac disturbances. This is all leading up to making you mad. This is what Frank de la Teja was talking about this morning. And so, illegal settlers, are you all going to stop coming just because they tell you the border's closed? Just because the border's closed? And so in this case, William Barrett Travis is actually jailed. He is jailed by Bradburn. You tell me he wasn't upset. That's why he winds up at the Alamo. And so in this case, when we look at Velasco, again, Velasco, it is going to be General Ugartechea that is going to stop the cannons going up the Brazos River. So in this case, when we look at all of these problems, all of these difficulties all around Texas, is it any wonder that you all were starting to get angry? You all as Anglos. So when we look at the Turtle Bayou resolutions at Velasco, what are they? They are an attempt to try to keep the Mexican government from charging you all these taxes. And who is it that they are supporting? My liberals, the Federalists. So, the Battle of Nacogdoches, we rarely hear about the battle. Wait a minute, you mean there was a battle at Nacogdoches? Yes, in 1832. Texas very nearly became independent in 1832. And in this case, Piedras is the commander at Nacogdoches. And this is actually the old stone fort. If any of you get to Nacogdoches, they have moved it onto the campus of Stephen F. Austin University. But in this case, again, what are we going to do? What are you all going to do? Are you going to fight back? In 1832, you thought you might. There was the war party and there was the peace party. Anytime you get a group of people together, there are going to be differences of opinion. And so, yes, you have the you're the peace party over here, war party over here. And so, poor old Fernando is stuck in the middle. In 1832, Santa Anna has joined the Federalists. If Santa Anna was nothing else, he was flexible. He would switch sides at the drop of a hat. And in this case, in 1832, he says, borders, we don't need no stinking borders. Open the borders, let the Anglos come in. And so sure enough, they start coming in. And so by 1833, Austin goes to Mexico City. And when Austin goes to Mexico City, what Austin is trying to do is to settle his people. Don't be causing problems. Don't be causing difficulties. And by 1834, the provincial deputation is going to establish trial by jury. This is what Austin was asking for. This is what the consultation asked for. The laws to be in English and to open the borders. And what does Santa Anna say? Sure, come on down. It's perfectly okay. And so, by 1835, Santa Anna and the Centralists are now going to say, wait a minute, we don't like these ideas quite so much. And so, in this case, Texas begins selling 11 league grants, giving. Some of you may have been to Mejia. If you've been to Mejia, actually Mejia was the vice president of Mexico, and they give him 11 leagues of land, 11 times 4,428. 11. So what are we talking? We're talking huge, huge grants of land. Everything around Mejia belonged to the vice president. Doesn't last, but So in this case, by June of 1835, General Cos is in Saltillo. General Ugartechea is trying to stop all of these rebels in Victoria. He calls for Carbajal. Who is Carbajal? He's your brother-in-law. He is your brother-in-law. And Benavides is your brother-in-law. Both of these men, you all sided with the Anglos. Why did you side with the Anglos? Where was Carbajal educated? He was educated in English in Kentucky by Stephen F. Austin. Thank you, Stephen Austin. You educated Carbajal in Kentucky. So he spoke English. And did he teach you English? We think he did. We think he did because you actually had, and I have found it, a subscription to the New Orleans Picayune, the newspaper, in English. So here Fernando is learning from his brothers-in-law. Plácido Benavides, of course, is having difficulties with the government. And Anahuac, by June of 1835, Captain Tenorio, again, taxes, taxes, taxes. It's always about taxes. Since we just had April 15th, that's appropriate. And in this case, William Barrett Travis captures Anahuac. And so what are we going to have? Travis says, we were just trying to stop the problems. We weren't trying to develop a revolution. We weren't revolting, except that by September, Santa Anna has changed governments. Santa Anna has now gone to a conservative, centralist government. And my liberals, you all are not so happy. So now you all are the ones that are up in revolt. And so when we talk about San Antonio, who are you going to support? Are you going to support the centralists and Santa Ana? Or are you going to support whatever, the Federalists and the rebels and the Texians? So who is it that you're going to support? This is one of the difficulties. There is a peace party and there is a war party. And this peace party is loyal to Mexico. You don't want to lose your land. But the war party wants independence. So what would you do? What is your view? Would you vote for independence? Or would you vote to stay peaceful? Ugartechea is now collecting customs and collecting the cannons. Wait a minute, who gave you the cannons? The government gave you the cannons. The Mexican government gave you the cannon. To do what? To fight against the Indians. The Comanches, remember? That's what you're there for. You're there to fight the Comanches. They gave you a cannon, and now suddenly they want it back. And you said, no, I don't think so. And so, problems? This, of course, is the cannon. Not exactly a large size cannon. And it actually had no wheels. It was tied to the back of a donkey. When they set it off, the donkey, of course, goes head over heels. A problem. Now, let's go back to Fernando and his family. You all now have to make a decision. Are you going to side with the Anglos, the Texians, or are you going to side with the Mexicans? This is a problem. And in this case, look at what happens. Fernando has married Maria Antonia Galvan, but she dies. So he's a widower. Maria Candelaria has married Jose Miguel Aldrete from Refugio. Alderites. Are there still Alderites in Refugio? Yes, there are. Jose Silvestre marries the De la Garza. My God, there are a billion De la Garzas. De la Garzas everywhere. But in this case, Lupita, the yellow ones are the ones who side with the Anglos, with the Texians. The ones in blue, I'm sorry, just backward. The ones in blue are the ones who side with the Texians. Carbajal and Benavides, both of them. because he taught you English, you and Carvajal and Benavides are going to side with the Anglos. You talk about a hard time at Thanksgiving. Probably they didn't have Thanksgiving, but Christmas anyway. Okay, so this is the problem in San Antonio. You have difficulties between the Federalists and the Centralists. And so poor Fernando, who is stuck in the middle, Plácido Benavides, Silvestre de León, Mariano Carvajal, and Collinsworth, all of them are going to side with the Texians. So were there Mexicans who sided with the Texians? Yes, there absolutely were. And in this case, by 1835, naval battles. We have lots of naval battles, but by September 20th, General Cos, Mexican general, is going to land at Copano. And you all have to decide, what are you going to do? And so when we look at October, 135 Tejanos under Benavides and Seguin are going to provide supplies and information to Austin and the army at Gonzales. So what would you do? What would you do? In this case, these Tejanos sided with the Texians, and so does Fernando. Yes, there is a consultation in November of 35, and once again, conflict between the peace party and the war party. In this case, the peace party is the one that wins in November of 35. But who is coming? General Cos is coming. And when General Cos comes in, these battles, these naval battles, General Cos is in San Antonio, and so you have to decide, are you going to fight? In this case, 300 Tejanos and Texians. You all together defeated General Cos. But did that make Santa Anna mad? You bet it did. Not only that, but your brothers-in-law, Carvajal, Peter Kerr, and you went to New Orleans to get supplies for the Texians. And you brought back those supplies. The only problem is you were captured by the Hannah Elizabeth, you were on the Hannah Elizabeth, you were captured by the Mexican ship Bravo. And they took you to Matagorda and threw you in jail. You and Carvajal and Kerr. Fernando had better get used to being in jail, because what they threw overboard, this was what they were bringing to the Texians. 2 boxes of muskets, rifles, guns, 18 kegs of gunpowder. You tell me you wouldn't have needed that. Carvajal and Fernando are sent to Matamoros. But luckily, it was your other brother-in-law, Plácido de Benavides, that comes and saves you from Matamoros. Plácido Benavides is the head of a Texian group. He's a lieutenant, a Hispanic Texian who is going to be in charge. Now, when they captured the Hannah Elizabeth, these were the goods that you lost, $1,270 worth of goods. All of that. Remember, shipwrecks. Anytime you had a shipwreck or a ship was captured, whoever gets to the ship first gets to take all the cargo and keep it for themselves. And so in this case, that's what you lost. Plácido Benavides from Goliad comes to Casamata, and he actually succeeds in rescuing you and Carvajal. But by this time, March 2nd, 1836, Texas has declared its independence. So you have to decide, are you going to go with these Texians and independence? General Urrea, of course, is coming up through the Irish colonies. And how do the Irish colonies feel about the Mexican army? They are your friends. So yes, it is the Irish Catholics who are going to defend all of these Mexican armies. General Urrea, who comes up through Goliad. However, at Goliad, remember they capture Fannin? You know what Carlos de la Garza does? Carlos de la Garza goes to General Urrea and he says, I need help to move the cattle. If you want cattle for your troops, let me have Fannin and Riddick and Teal. These were his neighbors. He saved his neighbors from the massacre at Goliad, and we rarely think about that. It was Carlos de la Garza. He had taught the Irish how to be cattlemen, and then he saved them from being shot. And so in this case, by March of 1836, those Goliad executions, Carlos de la Garza saves. There's the Carlos Rancho. It's still there today. It is still there today. And in this case, all of those Goliad executions, thanks to Carlos de la Garza, he saves his neighbors. Now, by April, right now, by April of 36, General Urrea has captured Victoria. And he takes one look at Fernando and he says, hey, I heard you were captured for having taken goods to the Texians. In jail. Fernando is back in jail again. By May of 1836, at the end of San Jacinto, General Rusk comes into Victoria and he says, hey, you've been saving the Mexicans, the Tejanos, back in jail. So first the Mexicans put him in jail, then the Anglos put him in jail. So Fernando, by this time, by 36, Patricia de la Garza says, we're leaving Texas. Now remember what happens if you leave Texas. You lose your land. But in this case, they weren't fleeing to Mexico. They were going to the United States. They were going to New Orleans. So in this case, they do not lose their land. It is actually Patricia de la Garza, with her support of the Irish. It is Patricia de la Garza that saves Fernando and her family, and she takes the land that she saves in Victoria, and the church in Victoria today is sitting on Patricia de la Garza's land. Thank you. Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, Stephen.